Welcome to the Date Night Confessions podcast. I'm your host, Zach.
And I'm Michelle. We created this podcast to have intentional, mindful, and real conversations about navigating life and love consciously. In these episodes, we explore what it means to create conscious connection, heal within relationship, and create a life you love with intention.
Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
So, Zach, who the heck are we? Why should anyone listen?
Yeah, I'm Zach. I am a goalkeeper and mindset coach. So I help athletes overcome limiting beliefs and essentially reach their potential through mindset work and the mental hurdles they face to hopefully build more confidence on and off the field.
And my name's Michelle. I am your fiance. I am a mom to two kids. I am a nurse practitioner. I am a breathwork facilitator. I am a high performance coach. I love all things spirituality, self-development, inner work, all the things. And we thought it would be really fun to create this podcast.
Yeah, we have conscious conversations on our date nights and in our everyday life. And we wanted to create an environment in which we're having those conversations, but it feels like we're on a double date with the people that are listening.
Yeah, exactly. We started our relationship out right away with kind of conversation cards. We're not really strangers was the game that we started playing like day 2 of knowing each other, even as we were building our friendship. And that has pretty much set the tone for our relationship. So we like to have deep conversations. We don't love the small talk. We love the deep talk. And that is really what we want to bring to this podcast. Talking about the real things, talking about things that are struggles, things that might not always be pretty, talking about the real things that people are going through, parenting, doing everything with intention. So when we say conscious relationship or conscious parenting, really, it's just
mindful, intentional living.
Perfectly said. So today's episode, we really wanted to talk about conscious relationships because that is the crux of our dynamic and what we really want to share with the podcast. And over the course of our episodes, we hope that you get a sense for all the different dynamics of what that could look like. Conscious relationship romantically, but also parenting, friendships, and showing up in your everyday life.
Essentially a bunch of conscious conversations along the lines of many different topics and how you can have those topics, how you can have conscious conversations within those topics.
So what I really think we want to bring to this podcast is conversations about all areas of life. Conversations about romantic relationships, friendship dynamics, parenting, step parenting, spirituality, self-development, personal growth, healing. And we hope that by us sharing our stories, you will resonate with that and there will be takeaways for you to apply to your own life as well. Conscious relationships. What does that even mean?
Yeah, I think it's important to define this to set the tone for our entire podcast. And I think for me, the definition of conscious relationship or conscious partnership or whatever is defining everything. So it's consciously living. It's consciously doing the relationship. It's bringing things into my conscious mind for awareness purposes. So what that looks like is defining our relationship non-negotiables, defining our individual core values and our relationship core values. It means having conversations and not just assume. It means being open. It means being incredibly direct with our communication. Obviously, we're human and we have our own traumas and triggers, but it's really trying to a conscious lens on everything because a conscious relationship can't come unless you choose to live consciously. And living consciously means that you're living a life with reverent intention.
Yeah. And I think even as you were saying that, I'm like defining that through our lens of what we're talking about, there's conscious and then there's unconscious. And so, the majority of our life and existence and thoughts and patterns and habits are actually in our subconscious or unconscious mind. They're out of our awareness, and our mind does this to make things easier and to be more efficient. But if we let that 95% of our kind of brain power run the show, we're doing things the way that they've always done instead of creating what we really want. And so when we talk about conscious relationship, we're applying that principle of consciousness, getting out of our unconscious and being really present and mindful and intentional, like you said, so that we can create the life we want, the relationship we want. And oftentimes this is getting out of the patterns and the life that we would be living on autopilot.
Yeah.
So kind of the backstory of what brought me to a conscious space and really desiring a conscious relationship was meeting Zach and being really knowing deeply that I wanted a conscious relationship. So when I did finally meet Zach, I had already been on a path of inner work and healing for several years. And I was very, very clear on the type of relationship I wanted to have. I was not at that time at all looking for a relationship. I just had gotten crystal clear within myself based on the relationship that had ended, that the next relationship I had would be very different and exactly what I wanted, that I didn't want to compromise my needs, myself, who I was, any further. And so I think that I met Zach at a time where I was getting really clear on who I am and had just ended a 15-year relationship with my previous partner who had spanned the majority of my adult life at that point and had a lot of childish patterns in it, given the fact that we met when we were teenagers. And so I ended that relationship really doing a lot of deep inner work on myself, learning who I was, discovering my voice, discovering who I am and what I want and what my needs are. And that allowed me to bring much more of myself forward into the next relationship that I had, which happened to be with you.
Yeah, I know for me, this journey started during the pandemic when life finally slowed down for me. It was the first time in my adult life where I was alone, and not from the sense of not in a relationship, like I was single, but also in the sense that I lived alone and I wasn't really seeing people because it was the pandemic. So all I was doing was pretty much waking up, doing a workout at home, and then going for a walk, and then everything was closed. I mean, even the beaches were closed. And so I got into therapy right before the pandemic started, which always kind of presents itself with some sort of reflection. It wasn't very deep at the time, but then the pandemic allowed me to explore a lot of what I wanted in my next relationship after having one that just ended also during the pandemic, and really getting clear on that. It was a way in which I coped with exiting that past relationship, was really trying to get clear on what I wanted in my next relationship. It was not consciousness. I never had that language. I never had that intention. It wasn't in my awareness to even desire that. And somehow whatever I wrote down in that journal in 2020, 2021 was pretty much what I ended up manifesting in my next partnership, which was with you, without really having the language, or actually not having the language. But if I looked back and I looked at that journal, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I didn't have the language, but this is exactly what it ended up being.
Manifestation 101.
Yeah, I'm a very powerful manifester. And so it's not to anyone's surprise that I got exactly what I wanted. But the conscious part, the conscious language specifically came when I met you. You had all this language, and it allowed me to dive into the world with so much of a clearer lens because you gave me the language, but then also in a deeper sense of you had so much knowledge. And so I got a lot of knowledge from you. I learned a lot from you. And then I've also done my own learning just in my own journey as I've gotten older and met other people and had different therapists and like men's coaches and such. And so the older I've gotten and the more we've gotten into our relationship, the more I've been able to bring.
Yeah, it's interesting when you reflected back that I had all of this language to it, and I had definitely been studying attachment styles, personal growth and healing, subconscious blocks and traumas and triggers, and I had been doing the work alone. I had been doing the work on myself.
Yeah.
And the beauty of relationship and the way that we see relationship is that it is a mirror where the other, yourself, is reflected back to you through the other. And it is a very humbling process as well when you have been doing inner work for a while and then meet a partner and feel like you are walking in healed and great and doing well, and then all of your stuff bubbles up and comes to the surface. And I think we can speak to that a little bit, because I think that's a common thing that happens when two self-reflective, maybe growth-oriented people are on a solo healing journey and then maybe enter relationship. It can be really confronting and sometimes feel like, oh no, is this really the right person? All this stuff is coming to the surface, because I think there's this idea that the right relationship is easy. And with a conscious, like you said, it means really defining things and having clear communication and clear expectations and all of those things. But those things are not always easy to do and easy to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think there's this rhetoric in society that says don't enter a relationship unless you've healed yourself. And there's different iterations of that. But I remember as I was going through my breakup during the pandemic a while ago, there were a lot of people that were like, no, you need to be single for a while. You need to be single. You need to heal. And I think there's very much truth to that, because you can be a relationship hopper for the sake of so many different traumas and attachment style wounds and such. But I think the idea of you really have to heal yourself before you get into a relationship, and that's not true at all, because you can have, like you said, have healed yourself, and then you enter a relationship and you're like smacked in the face with so many triggers that you're like, what is this shit? And also, you probably can't fully heal ever, period, but really get to the crux of things and the root of things until you're in a relationship. Because, like you said, the relationship is a mirror, and you don't know what you can't see. You see my shadows, period, and they're my blind spots, right? Mm-hmm. And your job in what you do, although I am resistant at many times, is to highlight those shadows so that way I can heal them.
Yeah, and highlighting that is the basis of any deep healing, comes from triggers and getting activated. And so by nature of that, like you said, shadows are your blind spot. So it takes someone else activating something within you. And so we are talking about romantic partnership and a conscious relationship within romantic partnership here. And if anyone's listening, not in a relationship, you can do this with a coach, with a therapist, with a friend that you deeply see and connect with. Yeah, I think by nature, triggers happen within a dynamic of two, because it's someone who can activate that thing within you that then comes up and is ready to heal and able to heal.
Is it true that you probably can't just be triggered if you never interact with another human? Because like I'm almost thinking about what I get triggered by. I get triggered by something you do. I get triggered by someone who does something on the streets. I get triggered by the kids, right? I get triggered by my parents, my siblings. I don't feel like if I'm sitting in a room alone, I'm getting triggered by anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't exist in a vacuum. And so even if you were like watching TV or you were, you know, doing it does come from external, but it could even be, I guess, like your memories. So like you probably couldn't just be untriggered completely, because there is no such thing as a full vacuum.
Yeah. So I guess for me, for my purpose saying that is like, it doesn't have to be romantic partnerships. You are going to get triggered by your parent. You're going to get triggered by your sibling or your adult figure, whoever.
You're going to get triggered driving down the freeway, road rage.
Yeah, you absolutely, like for those that do have road rage, it is absolutely a trigger. And it's a story that's created in your head and whatever else. And so you don't have to be in a partnership to, one, notice the triggers, and also to heal the triggers, because you're only ever going to get triggered by someone else, or I guess something, but
yeah, for sure. When we speak to that word trigger, what we're really talking about is something activating a old wound or pattern within you, typically on a subconscious level, out of your awareness. What that can look like is an adage that is used often is, if it's hysterical, it's historical. Meaning if your partner forgets to take the trash out and you go to throw something away and the trash is brimming over, and you get more than a little frustrated and you get irate, and there's stories attached to it of like, you never do anything for me, I have to do everything, you don't care about me. Like when those types of always never stories get attached to something, and it feels like the reaction is so much bigger to the thing that happened is because it's not about the thing that happened. The thing that happened is the trigger that then awakened all of those wounds and subconscious patterns within you. And then the gift, if you choose to see it that way, is that you get to then use that trigger for healing, that those stories, those patterns came up within you as an invitation to examine them, to look at them. And part of that requires slowness. And so when you talk about the pandemic, that was the great pause. That was the thing that allowed everybody to skirt to a halt and examine their lives, for some people, whether they wanted to or not, right? So you're no longer completely busy running from one thing to the next. It allows you that moment of pause, because if you're not slowed down enough, you probably will miss these triggers inside of you, and you'll just think that your partner's an asshole for not taking the trash out, and the person who cut you off in traffic is an asshole for driving like that, and the neighbor who didn't wave at you is an asshole for not saying hi, and you'll just continually externalize these things. But on a certain level, what do they say? If one finger is pointing out, then three fingers are pointing back at you.
Yeah, so when we talk about like conscious relationships, I touched on earlier about being mindful and intentional. And for us, that means that we are intentionally living our lives, not on autopilot. And for example, and what I mean by that is we are choosing what it means to be in a relationship together. And part of that is defining our core values and defining our relationship non-negotiables. I think it's really common in relationships for a lot of assumptions to happen. And then out of those assumptions are bred conflict, because you assume your partner is also assuming the same thing as you. So for example, a big one is the definition of cheating in our relationship. Most people assume it's physical intimacy. If you're physically intimate with someone outside of your partnership, that is cheating. But I have known, and I'm sure anyone probably knows of someone in a relationship that's gotten into a fight with their partner over this idea of cheating because they've done something with another human being that their partner didn't like. That could be liking an Instagram model's Instagram pictures, or responding to a DM from a girl or someone of the opposite sex, or someone that could potentially be a romantic partner, because this isn't just cis straightness. It could be flirting, and the definition of flirting is very up to interpretation, right? But if you don't leave things up to interpretation and you define them clearly, it means that you're trying to walk the line of consciousness. And for us, it was really important that we got really clear on what our individual core values were, what our core values of our relationship are, what our core values of our family were, and then also what were the relationship non-negotiables of ours. And so let's chat about it. What are our relationship non-negotiables?
Yeah, and really quickly, just to add to that, was that I think a prerequisite to being in a conscious relationship is having the introspection and self-awareness. And then also it requires a lot of vulnerability. So it requires you to not only check in with yourself and to know what your needs are, and to be constantly scanning and evaluating for what you need to speak up and what you need to ask for, but that vulnerability piece of asking for it, or of saying something that's bothering you when it's bothering you, instead of, I think oftentimes we push it down and we bottle it up because we don't want to say the hard thing, because that is vulnerable, and that requires that you have to, if I bring something to you and says, hey, I really didn't like it when you blah, 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 I could be met with rejection, and that is super vulnerable. So I just wanted to share that as far as like prerequisite to being in a conscious relationship that I don't think we mentioned yet. Non-negotiables. So you talked about...
Oh, I didn't know what that was.
You talked about clear communication and one expectation, which is defining what cheating looks like. I think that is a commonly missed communication practice.
Absolutely. But also a big assumed one. There's a lot of assumptions made specifically on that one.
In regards to relationship, the basic assumption all the time is that you guys are the same person. The underlying assumption is that my inner dialogue, inner thoughts, and the way that I view the world is the same way that you view the world.
Which is the center of every single conflict.
Right, yeah, because why didn't you do this? because I knew that it needed to be done. I knew that I wanted it.
Why did you do it? Why did you do it like this?
Mm-hmm.
Loading the dishwasher, taking out the trash
Mm-hmm.
when you want to.
Mm-hmm.
What's like the cleanliness of your house and how you guys exercise and eat food.
And I think the crux of what happens is when you don't have conversations about these things, then I believe the story of mine, which is you just don't care, or you don't prioritize me, or all of those like deep wounds that we have that become the stories. If we just make assumptions and believe those, then a bigger and bigger divide happens, versus if we can say the vulnerable thing and say, when you loaded the dishwasher this way, I felt like you were purposefully doing it wrong so that I would have to do it, or whatever the thing is, then you can actually have a conversation about it.
Yeah. So what are relationship non-negotiables?
I think early on we defined a lot around communication because we were not initially long distance, but when I would have the kids or not see you very often, like communication became a big piece around like how are we allowed to speak to each other, either verbally or in text messages, making sure that we had a clear standard of respect in our communication with each other, having clear communication around your needs for communication, which were a little bit greater than mine. And so that was something that I had to expand into as far as communicating with you. I'm leaving work. I'm in traffic, like whatever it is. Just to me, it felt like over communicating, but meeting that level of communication that you needed. And then also around building the trust. Trust is something that builds up over time. And we talk a lot about trust happens in the micro moments. So building trust around, if you text me, when I read the text, I will respond, and I will never purposefully ignore you. I will never block you. I will never hang up on you. Things like that became part of our standard that we still operate out of, but need less reminders of now.
Yeah. I think not turning off your location, not, like you said, blocking anyone.
We can pull it up right now.
I think for us, the idea of trust that you spoke about goes far beyond the trust of just not cheating on one another. I feel like when I see some videos online of, do you trust your partner? And the response is, yeah, I trust them not to cheat on me. And I think we've never really defined trust in that manner. The trust is that we won't block the other person. We won't turn off the location. We'll respond when we say we're going to respond. We'll call when we say we're going to call. We trust that when we get into conflict that the other person will attempt to regulate themselves so they can resolve the conflict at a later time. We trust that we're both going to do the work to heal our own triggers and traumas so that way we're not bleeding on one another. The definition of trust is so much different in our relationship. One, because not cheating is a bare minimum. And two, because we decided to define what trust truly was and what we wanted trust to look like in our relationship. And like I've already said, it goes far beyond just not cheating and just communicating, and the little details that I feel like honestly remind me of how people define trust in high school.
Yeah, I think just pulling up, we created a note back in the day that we still add to and fine tune, but things like trusting that during a conflict, we will take a time out to regulate our nervous system, to process individually before we come back to each other, and setting time limits for what that looks like so that the other person always knows that you're going to come back. Personal responsibility, that whenever we are triggered, that we'll take time to go inward and do some sort of processing before coming back to our partner. Radical honesty with ourselves and our others so that we can trust that if our partner has an issue, has a problem, has a need, that it's their responsibility to speak that need and not our responsibility to read their mind. And so trusting that they'll bring that to us. We also have personal responsibilities for ourselves and ways in which we want to care for ourselves so that we can bring our best selves to our relationship. And so that looks like doing our own inner work, making sure we're taking care of our bodies and movement and exercise and feeling our best, because that reflects how we show up in our relationship. And then also just being clear with our future vision, because that can change. And we talk about sometimes that relationships either grow together, or if you grow apart or grow at different rates or grow in different directions, then you eventually grow apart. And so really being clear with, yes, we share the same values in our life, and right now our vision aligns, but making sure that you're taking time to periodically check in with each other, whether that's every 6 months, every year, whatever it looks like, are you on the same page? Are you guys moving toward that same goalpost? And if not, can you course correct? What does that look like? I think also, like you said, trust, like trusting that the other person is going to champion you, is always going to support you and show up for you. And part of that looks like not speaking ill of you, of course, in front of your face, but also kind of like behind your back. So around friends or in other social settings. But these are our non-negotiables. And so yours will look different, could look the same. There could be things that you borrow and that you make your own, but that's the beauty of it, and that's the beauty of, two people coming together in relationship, is two very different people with very different backgrounds, with very different life experiences
that view life differently at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. And that they get to come together and define what it makes sense for their relationship. So
yeah, I think that on that note, like, we are very different. We are very different, and we are very different at different times of the day and at different times of the year. And we have sometimes opposite end personality preferences, traits. Thank you. And we aren't opposites in a way. It's not, opposites attracted and that nonsense verbal rhetoric or whatever. But we very much see the world differently, very much. And it hasn't.
I think it gets to be a practice that everybody gets to do, but that we have to learn how to cherish our differences.
And I think also because we're living consciously, the fact that we're different doesn't really matter. Yes, sometimes conflict will be bred out of the fact that we see the world very differently. But we have very similar core values, and we agreed consciously to these non-negotiables. And so it put some black and white into a nuanced situation, which it's like, hey, these are our boundaries. We both agreed to them. And regardless of if we see the world differently, we both agreed and we both created them. And that's something that you can do in your relationship too, because it doesn't have to be like, we're so different, we can never understand the other person, and we're just too much dissimilar. It's just that, yeah, we're different, and we have to learn how to navigate those differences, and we get to do it consciously.
Speaking of differences, because everyone's still getting to know us in our first date with everybody, will you share with me what you bring to our relationship? What do you think your special sauce is in our relationship?
I was hoping you'd ask me what our differences are.
Yeah, okay. So
it's okay.
Tell me what our differences are.
Oh, lots, so many. I could wake up really early, ready to go for the day, and you are like, don't talk to me. And you snooze your alarm, and I don't believe in more than one alarm. Wake up when your alarm goes off. And you hate to plan, and I have to come at opportune times to bring planning forward to you. And you can't just like shift gears quickly. Like, you have to be in the right mind and right set. And I am disciplined, structure. I could be militarian or militant.
It's like you're very like strict. Like
yes,
military.
Yes, and you're like flow. And...
You know what it is? It's because I am Goldilocks, and the porridge can't be too hot or too cold. It has to be just right.
I mean, that's true for your coffee. That's true for your food. And those are like, at the end of the day, those are frustrating things about you. And those are who you are. Like, I'm not sitting here waiting for you to change who you are. I either get to accept them, or I choose to leave because I'm like, I don't want to deal with this bullshit. And that's what's different about you. I mean, those are just some differences. We are very different people. And it is a constant dance of, I get to learn these things about you, someone who lives a very different life than me, or not lives, but thinks about life differently. And I get to constantly have a different perspective on things because of it. It's probably great that you don't think like me for my own sake, because then I'd be in my own world.
For the world's sake.
But what did you ask me before?
Well, you would think that I asked you, tell us what is wrong with Michelle. But what I really asked you was, tell me what your secret sauce is that you bring to the relationship. Which
is everything that how we're different. I bring structure and let's plan. But I think my biggest superpower, and you are so welcome for this, is my fun and adventure.
Cute smile.
No. My fun and adventure. Absolutely. Did you need someone? The universe was like, if for only this reason Michelle has this person, if for only this reason she needs to not die having never experienced the world.
Well, to be truthful about.
That is,
Hit you over the head with it.
yeah, my free spirit adventure soul, got the next trip planned already kind of guy.
Yeah, truthfully, if anybody knows anything about the Enneagram, I am an Enneagram 3 wing 2. So that is the achiever. But the struggle of an Enneagram 3 is that we can be like so goal focused and driven and career focused that we can get stuck in do. We can get so stuck in that we need somebody to. The antidote for a 3 is fun and adventure, and like
Is a 7.
that's the antidote to burnout and to that all work no play kind of balancing it out. So definitely embracing that side of fun, because I have that playfulness and that joy and that childlike energy and curiosity in me, and so it is nice to have that activated. And honestly, just to speak to this, I think it's an important facet when speaking about conscious relationship is that we talk about triggers and those coming up through the mirror of relationship, but also you can have, so the trigger would be like the shadow being activated, these things that are unhealed within you, but you also get to experience the light being reflected back through your partner. And so like where I might be really business focused or work focused or productivity focused, and you are looking at more like fun and adventure and how can we, go visit new things and experience new things, I get to have that reflected back through you. So that gets to activate those parts within me that are like, oh, I want to play, I want to expand, I want to have adventure. And so that is like a nice give and take that can also happen.
Yeah.
And it doesn't all have to look like inner child healing and wounds and triggers and like work in that way. It also gets to be this expansion into other positive facets and like where the light gets to be reflected back.
What do you feel like what's your superpower in the relationship? Bread and butter that you bring to the relationship?
I mean, the biggest thing that I bring to relationship is my gentleness and my softness and my love and my ability to be the one to say sorry first, to hold you through the hard moments and tend to the emotional needs of the family.
Yeah. I feel like that's like the universe is like, you can't do it alone. So let me just send you someone that will help you do it and walk through you with it.
Also, yeah, and you get to be expanded in that because you are also growing into more ability to feel your tenderness and feel your emotions and so it's the same thing. It just gets to be reflected back to you because I believe we all have these universal qualities within us and we all have this spectrum of humanity within us. And so they get to be reflected back as well.
I'm thankful for the universe for that. Okay, so let's leave them with this, okay? If someone wanted to start a conscious relationship, let's just say romantic for now, but all of this can be applied to platonic.
I was going to say they just need one person that they trust that is also willing to be in it with them.
Right, yeah. What are like some tips you can give them? 3 things that they could do to start like cultivating this with a new partner, with an old partner, with, you can put friendship if you want to, but let's give them a takeaway.
I think.
What can they apply? How can they apply this?
I think that, like I mentioned, I think that the first steps are really having awareness. And so needing to slow down enough to maybe build like a mindfulness practice or a presencing practice, unless we have another pandemic that like abruptly halts everything.
Praying for it.
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, thank you. I think it starts with you. Is that that's what you're saying? Yeah.
So
okay.
like it starts with you, and it starts with you being willing to sit with yourself long enough to hear the whispers, feel the percolations, understand what is coming up for you. I think it also depends on you being willing to be radically honest and take personal responsibility. So that means that you're not just pointing a finger outward and expecting everybody around you to change, that you're like, oh, okay, it's going to start with me, that I'm going to focus on me. And I think it requires, we talked about a lot of different things. I think regulating your nervous system, learning how to feel your emotions.
But what would you say to somebody who is like, okay, I really want this,
but I don't know if they're already in a partnership. And they're like, I don't know if my partner wants to do this with me.
That's a different question. I think it always starts with you for everything. So like you already said, but it starts with you still here because you have to be incredibly brave and vulnerable to bring it up to your partner.
To go first.
To modeling behavior is incredibly important regardless of any situation. People will listen or be more willing to listen if you are modeling the behavior rather than lecturing them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're in a partnership and you are wanting to explore this with your partner, invite them in. That's what you have to do. And that means that applies to everything. Invite them into the conversation. Invite them into what's happening in your inner world. Invite them into this on this path with you. Invite them in. And use that. What do I want to invite my partner in on? Because I think I have been in unconscious relationships before, non-conscious, subconscious, and you're alone. You're not inviting them in your inner world because it's too vulnerable, because it's too scary, because you guys are just bleeding on each other and enacting childhood traumas, and it's your childhood selves that are having conflict and fights, and it's never getting to accountability, like you said. It's never getting to the root of anything. It's get into a big fight and then love bomb and be like safe and okay, depending on what your attachment style is. Invite them into every part of who you are.
Yeah, and I could speak to this being in this dynamic in the past of holding the balance of leading with yourself, not nagging your partner or not trying to force them to change. I went as far as trying to do the work for my former partner. Those things didn't work, but also like Zach said, showing up, doing the work yourself and modeling it. And it is true that when one person changes the dance moves, the entire dance changes. So when one person heals within relationship, the entire relationship can change. Sometimes that's quote unquote enough, and sometimes it's not. And I think the reality of understanding where that line is for you, how long do you want to continue to do the work on yourself before you
are not getting met and then do something about it. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is that you can't lose either way, because you do the work on yourself, you heal, you grow, you evolve, and your partner either meets you and you blossom into this new, heartfelt, deeper, more vulnerable, connected relationship, or they don't meet you and you have evolved into a version of you who can then decide what they want to do.
Yeah, I remember my therapist saying really early on in therapy, which was talking about this path and this journey I was embarking on, essentially. And he said, one of two things happens, which is exactly what you said. I guess one of three, but it's really just one of two. You start this journey, this upward trajectory towards newfound life. And like you said, your partner either joins you or you start this. And this is like the third option that I don't believe really is a third option. You start it, your partner doesn't join you, and then you stop because you're like, well, if I keep going, I will lose my partner, right? But the idea is once you kind of start, it's going to be really hard to stop. Once you enter this conscious world, you enter a new life that you're like, I can't ever go back. Sometimes you wish you could go back because you're like, oh, it'd be really nice. Living on autopilot's easy and simple. But once you enter it, you can't stop. And so it does just become this upward trajectory. I feel like I can't say that word.
You're saying it fine.
Oh.
That's correct.
Oh.
No need to overthink it.
And your partner has to either choose to join you or you have to make the difficult decision. Will I accept my partner as is and be okay with it? Or do I need to leave for the sake of myself to go find myself / a relationship in which I deserve a partner who will join me? I think we're still given tips. So if you have any tips, something that they can take and apply, or did you want to move on and do our questions?
I don't think I have any more tips because I think it sounds like we've already covered it all. Do you have any? I guess my last tip would just be I can give some practical tools, but it doesn't feel like that's really what we're talking about. Yeah, let's just move on.
Okay, so on this podcast, we talked early on about how we met, how we a little bit started our relationship, friendship, and it started with these question cards. And there's so many brands and iterations and different kind of cards, conversation cards that are now on the market. But We're Not Really Strangers is, I think, the most popular and I think a lot of people are familiar with them as far as in my world, in my sphere. I've gifted it multiple times, the game. And now we have probably like 10 boxes, whether they're couples ones, friends ones, family ones, like children ones. We have so many. And so they're a part of our lives. They're a part of our everyday lives. And so we are going to end the podcast on a question for each other. We're going to pull a random card, ask the person, and then the other person's going to answer it, and then they're going to pull a card for us. We are not going to look at the card prior, and the person answering cannot look at the card prior either. So just draw and go. I'll go first. Well, you go. You ask first, but I'll answer first.
So what deck is this?
It's the Talking Hearts deck, which is the name of the brand, the name of the cards.
Okay, so the question is, what's your top priority for the remainder of the year?
Adventure, fun, constantly. I think the seasons are changing, although we live in an area where there really aren't seasons, but there's a little bit of a coolness in the air in the morning and evenings. And I'm really excited to hunker down in business and in work and in play, being home. What are we going to do in our household? We have canceled some travel plans to be home this fall. And so I'm excited for a lot of connection, a lot of hominess. My priorities for the rest of the year are to be present in whatever we're doing and put in a lot of work outside of the home in my career, in my profession, in my business, and create financial abundance. Begin that journey. I'd love to know this. This is a good one. If I could pamper you for a day, what would you want me to do?
Okay, this is good because I just had my birthday, and so I was like thinking about just thinking about myself and what I need, what I like. Pamper me. I would love a massage. I think I've been craving a massage lately.
You have been.
Yeah. So like getting a massage at a nice place, then going somewhere like to the beach to read. I think so. To me, pampering looks like getting to just have some self-care and pretty much be by myself. I'm an introvert, and I think my energy likes to just go
By yourself
inward.
without me?
Yeah, it would include getting a massage from somewhere
A
nice.
couples massage or just alone?
And going to the beach, and then I would sit and I would read.
But all alone though. So
I would sit at the beach and read.
Does not include me.
And then
Okay,
I'd
fine.
come home, and then you could make me dinner and we could eat
Oh,
together.
so you spend your whole day by yourself?
Yes. Thank you. Take notes.
No, I'm couples massage, beach day together, and then
I'm
make
an
dinner.
introvert, and I want my own energy. We are not connected. This is not a toxic relationship.
I am an introvert as well, and I don't get drained from you. You wish. Hey, anyway, okay, guys, thanks for joining us, and we really enjoyed this first podcast. We're excited to release one weekly. I think we're excited for whatever it becomes, whatever it can be, but I think
We really want to build community with this podcast, and so we would love to hear from you.
yeah, we take in feedback, and that can be building community, and also could just be feedback, whatever it looks like. Share it with a friend. Tag us on Instagram. We would love to see what your takeaways are. Our Instagram and TikTok is at Date Night Confessions Pod. You can also email us at datenightconfessionspod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. I want to emphasize that for the 5th time. Email us any feedback, topics you'd love to hear us cover, and any questions you like our advice on or take on or would just like us to answer.
Yes, we will be doing questions at the end of our podcast. We just did conversation questions together, but in the future, we'd love to answer any listener questions or scenarios that we can give feedback on as well.
And lastly, we love reviews, okay? They will honestly help support our podcast and get it out to more listeners. If you leave us a 5-star review, we take feedback in emails, not in review form, okay? If you leave us a 5-star review, you email us, screenshot it, email us that you've done a review, 5-star specifically. We will send you a free guide of 10 questions for your next date night. So you want to cultivate a conscious relationship, platonic, not. This can be for a partner, it can be for a friend, it could be in parenthood. We have a free guide of 10 questions that you can use on your next date with whomever that can help build that relationship and help you have deeper conversations.
Or if you just want to use it as journal prompts, that would be a fun thing you could do as well.
So join us every week as we talk about all things conscious, connection, love, mindfulness,
and building an intentional life. Thank you so much for listening.
See you guys next week.
Bye.